Good afternoon, everybody. It is Friday. Welcome on in. I'm your host, Bull Muscle. Got a little something different today. Got an interesting consultation here. If you would like to ask me a question, be it about fitness, your boy benching 315 for reps today. Could be about diet, could be about personal finance or philosophy, any other question. Sometimes I get ones that are off the wall, and today is no exception. So let's dive on into it. How's it, Bull? I've seen you talk a little bit about college football, and after your video with Red, I'm left wondering. FBS has some problems right now. How would you fix the conferences? I thought this was a very good question. So I went ahead and made a little PowerPoint to explain how I personally think it should be done. Have a look. Obviously, this requires giving me dictator over college football powers. I tried to keep it semi-realistic, but there are some things that I think need to be changed to make it truly as good as it could be. So let's dive on in. All right. So let's start with where we're at now. We got 136 teams. We have 10 conferences. There's a huge strength of scheduling disparity problem to the point where it's almost like they're in two different leagues, right? Playing a MAC schedule and playing an SEC schedule, you might as well be. I think the gap between an SEC schedule and a MAC schedule, or an SEC schedule and a Conference USA schedule, is about the same as a Conference USA schedule versus an FCS schedule, or if not even more, given that I think it's more regular that FCS teams will beat a Conference USA team than a Conference USA team will beat an SEC team. Obviously, any given Saturday and all that, but you get the point. Uh, there are a lot of teams that I think have no business being in FBS, right? If you can't tangentially claim that you've got a shot at making a bowl at least, 1/3 of the time, you probably shouldn't be at this level. That means you're having losing seasons at least 67% of the time. So, I'm not saying we need to get rid of all the doormats, but there's some obvious ones, Kent State, that have no business being at this level and frankly might not even be that good in FCS. It's time to move them where they belong. In addition, we've got transfer portal chaos and regional conferences have more or less died. So, here's how I think we should fix it. First off, transfer portal. You open it March 1st, you close it August 1st. You have a set off season. Any coaching changes should have already happened. So that way, when you transfer, you know what coaching situation you're getting into. There's no questions about it. A single down counts as 1 year of eligibility. None of this Mickey Mouse, so I played 2 games, therefore it doesn't count redshirt bullshit. If you play, that's a season. So, you know, use that wisely. You can only transfer once before being ineligible, okay? So it's the same thing. Pick your players, or pick your transfers really carefully. And if you want to do it again, you better start looking at FCS schools, which is totally fine. Remember, if you want to go to the NFL, there are plenty of good players who have come from FCS schools that got their shot in the league. If you're good enough, the NFL will take note. You have a total of 5 years of eligibility. Look, I get COVID screwed a lot of this up, but we need to not have 7 and 8 year players of eligibility. That's getting ridiculous. 10 conferences of 12 teams is going to be the other part. Okay. You're going to say to yourself, wait, that's 120 teams. Yep. We're going to be moving some teams down. And don't sit here and tell me there aren't 16 teams you can think of that don't belong in FCS. And if you really want to argue it, fine. I could see maybe going 10 of 13 teams and cutting 6 of them. I personally think that's still way too generous. 12-game regular season. Okay. You have 8 games in conference. The conferences themselves are going to be rebalanced. So you're going to have some cupcakes in there, which means, right, the conferences, they can choose how they pick it. I personally think 2 divisions of 6 is perfect. And then, you have 5 in-division games you play every year. Then you play 3 of the other division and you alternate 3 and 3. Really simple. But, if you want to do like the MAC does, the 3 pods of 4, or do a round robin with no divisions, you could make that work. You do 4 games out of conference, and this is for your rivalries, okay? Naturally, if you're going back down to 12 team conferences and you're trying to balance them, Some conferences are going to get broken up. Big Ten, SEC. It's going to happen. All right. So those 4 games, if you're an SEC or a Big Ten fan bitching and moaning about, oh, we don't get X as an in-conference rivalry, well, you got 4 opportunities to schedule them. I suggest you do so. Your cupcakes are built in. Each conference has a couple cupcakes. So you no longer have to worry about scheduling those out of pocket, and you no longer have to worry about paying them up front to do it. You don't have to pay for those games. Rather, they get a chunk of the proceeds from conference revenue. Yes, you're going to have to share with a couple of the smaller schools. Deal with it. There is a 16-team playoff. 10 of the seeds, as you can guess, go to conferences. 6 go to wild cards, right? And also, shut the fuck up, Notre Dame. We're tired of this. Oh, I get to pick my schedule every single year, all my games, and I get to have Mickey Mouse rivalries with fucking Purdue and Navy. No, stop that. We're all tired of that. If you want to act like you are a perennial contender, and as Notre Dame, you're a blue blood, you should just start being serious about your schedule. Okay? If you really want to play USC, you know, really I should say Southern Cal because the USC is in Columbia. But if you really want to play the Trojans once a year, make that one of your 4 out of conference rivalries. But you're going to have to suck it up and play some teams that are actually, I don't know, near you. So, playoffs. We're bringing back the BCS, baby. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But we're only doing it for the seeding, okay? The conference winners, if you win your conference, you're in. You don't have to worry about it. If you win your conference, you are in. The BCS will seed you, okay? So predictably, right, there will be some imbalances between the conferences. For instance, you might have a down year for the ACC. Well, if that's the case, they might be seeded closer to 10 and further away from 1. Right? This is where I think a computer or an algorithm works pretty well. Seeding, I think it does fairly well, or no worse than a committee does anyway. Now, seeds of 11 to 16, this is where it gets interesting. You have 6 bowl years winners. This is your New Year's 6, quote unquote. We're moving the dates, but it's effectively the New Year's 6 bowls. None of the playoff names are bowls. The bowls select the final 6. So there is a lot to play for. The bowls, or at least these 6, are meaningful. As far as the other bowls, if teams want to schedule them, they can schedule them. That I don't think I or really anybody else cares about here. So you're going to have 2 bye weeks per season, regular season. Okay, that means the season should begin right around Labor Day, and it's going to wrap up right around Thanksgiving. You're going to have your conference championship games the first week of December. You're going to have your Army-Navy game after that, okay? If Army-Navy somehow is part of a conference championship game, we'll let the conference 2 be determined that has both of those teams. They get an exception. Army-Navy, I strongly believe, is the greatest rivalry in college football. Shut the fuck up, Ohio State. Shut the fuck up, Michigan. And for what it's worth, shut the fuck up, A&M in Texas. Or Clemson in South Carolina, whatever. I don't want to hear it. Army-Navy is the best rivalry in college football. It's what college football, the best of college football, is truly about. Okay? So, Army-Navy gets its own week. Suck it up. If one of them is in a conference championship, we can move that around. But that's generally how I feel about it. The other reason I like that is because it gives the New Year's 6 bowl teams a little bit more time to recover. Here's why. You're going to have 5 bowl games to determine the wild cards, 1 from each conference. The losers of the conference championship game versus the 3rd best team as determined by the BCS. The 6th bowl game, this is where you drop a little bone to all the fuckers on the committee, all the media talking heads who like to expound upon how they are the founts of knowledge in college football. You throw them a bone, you give them a committee, and they can determine the 2 best teams that are not in those 5 bowl games or the conference champions, and you let them duke it out for the final spot. That way, you give the committee something, makes ESPN happy, it gives them plenty of bullshit to talk about. They can have their big fancy show. Scheduling. First round of playoffs is going to be New Year's. Second's going to be early January. Semifinals in mid-January. The finals will be somewhere before the Super Bowl or thereabouts. You can work with the NFL to schedule this, bumping, the NFL back an extra week since they switched to a 17-game schedule, and I'm sure an 18-game schedule is in the works. I think the Shield would be okay with working with college on this. So here are your bowls. You got to have the Big 6, right? I tried my best to keep this as linked to their traditional conferences as I could, which is why the Cotton Bowl is the Southwest and the Southeast. It's why the Rose has the Pac-12 and the Great Lakes Conference. We'll get to that. It's effectively the successor to the Big Ten, but I'm if we're going with all conferences are 12 teams, the Big Ten as a concept needs to go away because that's fucking stupid. Can we all agree on that? Even Yankees, right? Once the Big Ten no longer had 10 teams, it was kind of a dumb name. Let's be real. All right. It would be like if the Sun Belt had a bunch of teams from the Northeast and the Midwest in it. It would be stupid. All right. So we're gonna have the Orange Sun Belt versus Big 12, the Fiesta Bowl, right? Mountain West is usually tied to that versus the Big East. Yes, the Big East is returning. You mentioned Army and Navy. Spoiler, yes, Army and Navy will be in the Big East. Sugar, you're gonna have the ACC versus the MAC, and the MAC is not a pushover conference this time around. The Peach, again, that's going to be the one where the committee can stick their thumbs up their butts and pretend they're important, and we throw them the bone. They get two more teams. Um, for the most part, that Peach Bowl, that's going to be the sort of the 16th seed in the playoffs. They're going to face number one, and realistically, they're probably going to get wrecked. So let's start. Who's in the conferences? We've got the ACC. It's regional. You're going to have states on the Atlantic coast. Shocker. So it's going to be your Virginia schools. You got the Hokies, you've got the Liberty Flames, you've got Old Dominion, you've got the Cavaliers, you've got South Carolina, Coastal and Clemson from the Palmetto State. And then from the Tar Heel State, you got North Carolina, Duke, North Carolina State, and App State, and East Carolina. You might be saying to yourself, wait, where's Wake Forest? Wake Forest is getting the chop, and I'll explain why. All right. I think this would be suit itself really well towards having, I don't know, maybe a tobacco division for the Virginia and North Carolina teams and a Palmetto division. Or you could do you could do something like that, right? You could have Clemson, South Carolina, Coastal, Old Dominion, East Carolina, uh, and Liberty within one bowl or something like that, or within one division. You get the idea. So next one up, all right? Next one up, we've got the Big East. It lives, and it is stronger than it once was. Now, I will grant this is probably one of the weaker conferences in FBS due to the reality of there really only being one strong Northeastern school in the country, that being Penn State. This was always going to be the case. So realistically, Penn State will probably be in the playoffs a lot. However, they will probably very seldom be a top five seed because their strength of schedule will be pretty difficult. If I were Penn State and I was in this conference, I would use those out of conference 4 games wisely and schedule some good opponents. I think Penn State could very easily do this. Obviously, I don't think they want the smoke from Columbus, but they could find some other games that, yeah, I don't know who Penn State's other big rivals are besides Ohio State, Pittsburgh, West Virginia. They could come up with it. Penn State's got plenty of. I think there are a lot of teams that would love to schedule a home and home with, going to Happy Valley. That's a big deal. Like if you're going to Happy Valley, you're having a big year. Like that's important. But you've got a lot of teams that, while maybe they're not blue bloods or they're not perennial 10-win teams, they're teams that could have a run every now and then. Syracuse, not this year, but you get it. Pitt, West Virginia. Army has been pretty good as of recently. And credit where it's due, JMU and Delaware, they are new. I thought it improper to immediately yank Delaware out of FBS since it just got in. The jury's still out on them. So I'm letting Delaware off sort of with an asterisk here. It also fits the region really well. They're an in-state flagship university, and so they get a pass. Next up, we are resurrecting the Big 12 with the members of the Big 8, Tulsa, North Texas, and Sam Houston State. These three predominantly serve as cupcakes for these other 8 teams. Wait a minute. Who are we missing? Colorado's out. But instead, we've got Missouri State. Much like Delaware, they just got up to FBS, so they deserve a pass. So you got 4 cupcakes here. Now, North Dakota State is an FCS school. However, if you go and look at what North Dakota State has done to the rest of FCS, They have had perhaps an even more dominant run than Alabama did over the last 15 years. North Dakota State probably belongs in the FBS more than probably 30 or 40 FBS schools. I think it would be really cool to see them in the North Dakota in the Big 12. I think they could take on Kansas or Kansas State or Missouri or maybe even challenge Oklahoma. So I would put an asterisk here, and same with Sam Houston State. They're still pretty new to FBS, so. But if Sam Houston State, does pretty poorly, you could see dropping them for maybe South Dakota State or Montana. All right, moving on to the Great Lakes Conference. We are done with this Big Ten horse shit, okay? All right. We have three major powerhouses. We have Ohio State and Michigan because putting them in different conferences would be dumb. We have Notre Dame, and we have Sparty, and we have a lot of flunkies. This Great Lakes Conference is going to have the same problems. The Great Lakes Conference, this is interesting because you've got three really good teams typically. Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame. You've got two teams, Michigan State and Cincinnati, that are usually okay to good. And then the other, what would that be? Seven teams are typically 5 to 6 of those seven are going to be pretty poor most of the time. This is where Ohio State and Michigan and Notre Dame, where you're going to say, hey, where's our rivalry with X? First off, most years, if your rivalry with Indiana was what you were claiming, come on, Indiana's not historically a very good football team. If you want to reschedule the Illabuck Buckeyes fans, by all means, you've got one of four out of conference games to go schedule with Illinois. Michigan, if you want to schedule with any other blue bloods you fancy, go for it. You've got four out of conference games. I don't really, if you want to, I think Wisconsin would probably be a big one for Michigan. I'm not, apart from the most obvious Big Ten rivalries, I'm not super up to date on like which Big Ten schools dislike each other the most beyond the obvious ones. Like obviously, right, Sparty hates Michigan the most. Michigan hates Ohio State the most. Ohio State hates Michigan the most. IU and Purdue go at it. Wisconsin and Minnesota go at it. You get the idea. But again, that's those second tier rivalries. That's where those four out of conference games really shine. Speaking of, all right, we've got a MAC that is a lot stronger than it once was. Yes, there are still some MAC schools here. However, we've shifted the MAC to sort of be more of a Big Ten West MAC hybrid. So you've got Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Northwestern. Granted, Northwestern is not really a good program. Illinois. You also have Louisville and Kentucky. The reason I put Louisville, Kentucky, and its doppelganger Western Kentucky in the MAC is because it is largely middle American, and in terms of distance, it's a lot closer to the Indiana schools than it is to a lot of other schools it was in the SEC. I will grant that Kentucky loses some rivalries because of this. However, eh, look, Kentucky football fans, for all two of you that are ever going to watch this video, be real with me. What SEC rivalry are you competitive in? The one with Vanderbilt? And if that's the case, okay, great. Schedule that as your one of your out of conference games. The one with Tennessee, the records would show otherwise. I think it's a pretty shocking rivalry statistic. So Kentucky, yes, this is not ideal for you in a football sense. However, basketball, having an in-conference rivalry with Purdue, that might not be bad. I think a lot of people would find that entertaining. I feel like this would be a very strong basketball conference, but it would also be a pretty good football one. We got the Mountain West. The Mountain West, pretty predictably, is all the Rocky Mountain states besides New Mexico. We'll get to New Mexico later. You've got the three Utah teams. So two of those are maybe not blue blood level, but pretty strong contenders. Typically BYU or Utah, one of them is ranked every year, if not both of them. Same with the two Arizona teams. It looks like the Wildcats might be better this year, which is unusual. Typically, it's the Sun Devils. You've got the two Nevada teams. They're more kind of cupcakey side. Same with Wyoming. Boise is having a down year, but typically they're pretty good. And then you've got the three Colorado teams. I will grant this is probably one of the weaker conferences. You would imagine this is probably somewhere in that 7 to 10 seeding most years. Unless, again, if you're BYU or Utah, by all means, schedule some really strong OOCs and then make a run, and then boom, you get a higher seed. We are righting a historical wrong here. The Pac 12 comes back. However, It is truly just Pacific Coast teams this time. So you're going to have your California teams, and yes, that means Fresno State. That's right. All you uppity coastal California fans have to travel to Fresno every other fucking year. Deal with it. You also have the Apple Cup reunited, the Civil War reunited, Oregon and Washington fans. Shame on you for ditching your in-state colleagues like that. That was pretty shitty of you. We have some, and then we have some cupcake fodder. San Jose and San Diego State, although San Diego State's not bad. God, Stanford is just abysmal right now. And then, well, I mean, where else would you put Hawaii? The state that is surrounded by the most Pacific should probably be in the Pacific Conference, right? Uh, I could make the argument for moving Hawaii to the FCS, but counter argument. Anyway, moving on. SEC. This is going to piss some people off. I get it. We're getting angry Alabama fans on line one. Hear me out. Remember, you have 4 out of conference games. So, Alabama fans, you want to go schedule Tennessee? Do it. I'm sure they wouldn't mind. But this would be very fun. I think you would have a Sunshine division. So, you'd have the 6 Florida teams right here. FAU, you barely made it in. So, congratulations. You get to be you get to be the doormat of this conference. Same with you, Jayville State. Jayville State too new here to really justify pushing you out. So congratulations, you. But if Jacksonville State drops off, you could easily send them back to FCS and put South Alabama in here. Yes, South Alabama got the chop. Look, Alabama is a football crazed state, but it is not capable of supporting 5 different FBS programs. It just doesn't have the population base. Same with Tennessee. We'll get to that later. But you've got Georgia Tech reconstructing righting a wrong. Frankly, look, Georgia Tech. Why are these two not in the same conference? They used to be. I get why, because of Bobby Dodd versus Bear Bryant, that old brouhaha back in the '50s. But no, this should be in. And frankly, Alabama Georgia Tech used to be a fun game too. Um, Georgia Southern, again, kind of in there to help balance. This is probably the strongest of the conferences because you've got Miami, Florida State, Florida, even the G5 teams here, the historic lesser known programs. UCF has had good years. USF is currently having a good year. You've got Auburn. So you've got, in this conference alone, Georgia Tech, you've got probably 6 or 7 really good teams. Unfortunately, that's just the nature of geography. There's no way to have geographically balanced conferences. Like this is after cracking the SEC, it's still very much OP. This is where, okay, SEC teams, you may want to think about scheduling maybe some softer opponents out of conference. Now, I will grant again, there are some, Alabama fans are going to want Ole Miss, LSU, and Tennessee probably. Okay, maybe your fourth team, you go and find yourself a nice, maybe you come out here to Hawaii or something. I don't know, right? Auburn fans, you still get to play Georgia and Alabama, which I'm sure you're thrilled about. This is just the reality of being an Auburn fan is that your geographical proximity to other powerhouse schools is always going to make your strength of schedule insane. There is no reality in which Auburn has an easy strength of schedule unless you put Auburn in FCS. And I know Auburn fans don't want that. So it's the tough draw here. Anyway, I still think this would be God, you would have some fantastic conference rivalries. But this right here is probably where you play the scenarios that I started with in action. So you've got, let's just say Alabama, Miami, or let's say Georgia and Miami go to the SEC championship. Let's say Georgia wins. Miami gets a week of reprieve during the Army Navy game, and then they play either Alabama, Auburn, or Georgia Tech, whoever the BCS decides is the third best team out of that. So I think that would be extraordinarily competitive. And then, right, that's still not over for the SEC because the committee can then say, all right, what about the 6th team? Well, probably another SEC school fits that. Let's be realistic. So, in theory, this conference could get as many as 3 teams in, but no more than that. Now we've got the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is sort of the other half of the SEC, and it is too pretty packed. I mean, you've got Tennessee, LSU, and Ole Miss off the top. That is some power right there. You've got a Vanderbilt squad that looks every bit as good as those three teams right now. Tulane does not look bad at all, and every so often, Mississippi State shows up pretty powerful as well. This, I will say, is probably slightly easier than the SEC for now, but it's still a very strong conference in general. But at least, if you're a poor Mississippi State or Ole Miss fan, you've been dealing just with obscene strengths of schedule for a long time. At least you've got, Louisiana or UAB or Troy baked in there. That kind of maybe heals it a bit. Um, God, sorry, when I said Alabama not able to support five programs, six programs, excuse me, now that Jayville State is up. UAB, I will grant you can make an argument for chopping UAB over South Alabama, but I feel bad for UAB. They got kind of screwed out of existence in the 2010s due to the machinations of a certain someone in Tuscaloosa, and I think that's wrong. So they get the nod. They get to stay in FBS. But if UAB were to fall into FCS, you could always put South Alabama or some other team from that region in here, Middle Tennessee, something like that. You'll notice, yeah, Middle Tennessee, right? Same thing. We are reviving the Southwest Conference, people. This is righting a historical wrong that you can blame the Oklahoma Sooners for. Yes, Oklahoma killed the SWC. Go watch that video that I did with Red 5478 on Texas A&M's legacy of failure to see how Oklahoma did way more to demolish that conference than you thought. We've got the Aggies. Yes, I put them over Texas. Yes, I am that petty. We've got the Longhorns. Those are probably your two heaviest hitters on a normal year. However, you've got Arkansas, Tech, Baylor, TCU, SMU, and Houston. All of those teams are pretty good, if not every year, a lot of the time. Then you've got, okay, Texas State, UTSA, La Tech, those are your cupcakes. And then New Mexico gets in mostly because, look, it's the Southwest Conference. You should have at least one school in New Mexico belonging. And the Lobos had a slightly better overall record, and they're the flagship school relative to the New Mexico State Aggies. I hate to do my fellow Aggies dirty like this, but good Lord, New Mexico State, your record is trash. So let's talk about it. Speaking of trash, we got the conference, the chopping block. What 17 teams, because we added North Dakota State, are getting the axe? And they're not getting the axe, right? They're getting relegated to the FCS. And if they want to apply to FBS, they need to apply and justify which conference they want to go to. And they need to justify why they would be a better fit. And they've got to say, which team are we switching for? So that's a tough order, but it's the point, right? So record, strength of schedule, the number of bowls made and won, flagship university status, right? So this is why New Mexico and Hawaii got the pass. Also because I'm biased in favor of Hawaii, fuck you. Recency bias, right? So if your team, was really good in 1925, okay, great, but like that's not really relevant. And school size, right? The bigger school, money talks and bullshit walks, as Mr. Red likes to say. So not one of these kind of dominated over the other, but it was an agglomeration of all of these factors. First one up is Rice. Good Lord. Look, even in the Southwest Conference, John F. Kennedy once stated in a speech about we choose to go to the moon, and he compared going to the moon in the 60s with why does Rice play Texas? That really sums up the Rice program. I have no love as a former Southwest Conference fan, or rival rather, over the Rice Owls. And look, they are a force to be reckoned with in baseball, but looking at their football program, I'm not sure they would even dominate an FCS. So Rice belongs there. Kent State is probably the most obvious one for the chopping block out of any of these teams. Good fucking God. One conference championship in 74 years, and you were in the MAC that entire time? What are you doing? Akron, not much better. 33 years is pretty poor. Same with Eastern Michigan, 49 years. Look, you got to do some shopping somewhere, and these teams are the worst the MAC has to offer. I don't want to downplay on the MAC. There have been some really good MAC schools over the years, but these three are pretty poor. Buffalo, no winning records versus any other MAC school. That means you are struggling to compete in one of the weakest conferences in FBS. Get out. UTEP Miners, you have not won a bowl since 1967 and one winning season in the last 10 years. No, get out. Temple, you are 500 versus an FCS program in your same city with two conference titles in 60 years, both of which were pretty fluky. They did not lead to sustained success. I think you'd be better playing with FCS Villanova in FCS. Wake Forest it's a tiny size. North Carolina is already pretty saturated. App State took a lot of the new talent coming into North Carolina. I do not think Wake Forest can compete. It is a wealthy school, much in the same way that Vanderbilt is, but Wake Forest doesn't even have the historic prestige or talent that they do, and it's even smaller. Wake Forest is a very small school. I think it would be better it would probably become an FCS powerhouse, but it belongs there. The same with New Mexico State. Yes, Jerry Kill has helped with recent success, but the overall record here, New Mexico State is one of the worst of the worst. They were one of those teams with decades of, sub 5 win seasons in a row. You got to do some chopping somewhere. I would be willing to put New Mexico State in over Louisiana Tech if, fortunes were to reverse, if La Tech just falls flat on its face and New Mexico State has some good years in FCS, maybe an FCS championship or two. That's what it would take. You'd have to start winning FCS championships to move up a level. I think this would also force between this and the transfer portal rule, it would also force a lot more eyeballs onto FCS, which I think is a good thing for the sport. These are the teams that should have moved to FCS to begin with. Now, I was talking about Jayville State and Delaware and Missouri State and a lot of these others as okay, you get a grace period because you just moved up. Kennesaw State, I cannot do that. You fired your successful head coach in year one, and you share a city with the same FBS school. No, this was an ill-advised move, or at least a very ill-executed one. Go back to FCS where you clearly belong. They were a good team in FCS, but when you fire your head coach in year one, just as you're moving up, that is a canary in the coal mine. Same with South Alabama. They only moved into FBS fairly recently, and they have very little to show for it. Charlotte, same thing. No Power Five wins until 2021. No games where they have ever put more than 20,000 people in the stands. And since they have moved up, an 0-1 bowl record, dude, no. Massachusetts, this one is in the New Mexico State territory. They are just abysmal every single year. They had no business joining FBS. Right, if you've been in FBS for 10 years and you still haven't made a bowl, it was a mistake to move to FBS. I think we can all agree on that. Florida International, no winning seasons in over a decade, and 93 and 178 is pretty bad. You've really only had one or two seasons that could be described as anything remotely considering a success. And again, Florida's already pretty overrepresented, so you had to do some shopping there. Georgia State, same thing. Much like Kennesaw State, you share a city with FBS. I grant Atlanta is big, but no, you lost out to Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern has a much better overall record, and you have more losses to FCS teams than Power Five wins. This suggests that you would be better in FCS than FBS. ULM, oh, good lord, in the Massachusetts territory. You moved to FBS in 1994, and you have been to a grand total of one bowl. Yes, you had the meme win against Nick Saban in 2007, but okay, you could have achieved that as an FCS school as well. Let's be honest. Middle Tennessee. Okay, this one was where I needed one more team. Middle Tennessee has probably the best resume out of all of these. Their overall record is still pretty poor. Your only in-conference winning records are over FIU and UTEP, though, and those are two teams that are not only getting the chop, but very clearly getting the chop. You've never been ranked. You have had a little bit more bowl success than the rest of them. So I could make, again, if there was a team, I'd say I put it this way: I would bet on Wake Forest and Middle Tennessee and maybe South Alabama to be the most likely ones to go back to FCS and start becoming powerhouses. And if they won a few FCS titles and, we get a perennial doormat of a team in one of these new conferences, be it the SEC, the Sun Belt, or the ACC, that's where you do the switch. So no solution's perfect, but I think this solution solves most people's complaints. It balances the conferences somewhat. There is a limit to what can be done unless you want to make basically an AI algorithm balance things, and you're going to get rid of rivalries. And you won't have any geographical stability. This, you've got a lot of regional differences, which means people can afford to go to games. They don't have to travel all the way across. Again, you're not getting rid of too many historical rivalries because you can schedule them as out of conference games. Because you have built in cupcakes, you can schedule those 4 games to be meaningful. I think that's a really good thing. Or if you're in the SEC, you can schedule them to be cupcakes because, good Lord, that is still a gauntlet of a conference. So, as far as those previous FBS teams, so we've got Rice, Kent State, Akron, Buffalo, Eastern Michigan, UTEP, Temple, Wake Forest, New Mexico State, Kennesaw State, South Alabama, Charlotte, Massachusetts, FIU, Georgia State, ULM, and Middle Tennessee. If you put any of them against North Dakota State on a neutral field, I'm picking the Bisons every single time. And then again, if you're going to complain about, well, what about this rivalry? What about this rivalry? You can still schedule it, just schedule it out of conference. And then the addition of more cupcakes in conference and 2 bye weeks offsets a longer championship and playoff schedule, right? The Army Navy game effectively acts as a subtle 3rd bye week for everyone else. It will make the bowl games a lot more competitive and interesting to watch. All in all, I think this is as close to as perfect a solution as you can get. I haven't seen any better ones, and I hope y'all enjoyed. That's all I've got for y'all. If you would like me to answer any question of yours, as always, you can write to me at askbullmuscle@gmail.com or drop me a line on my Discord. Don't DM me. Ask me in my server if can, unless it's if it's personal, just write to me by email. But as always, y'all, make good decisions. Those good decisions form your actions. Those actions form your habits. Those habits form your values. Those values form an ethos. That can be the guide to start through the rough waters of life. I have a few other videos I need to crank out. Probably not going to do that tonight. Might do that over the weekend though. So you'll probably see a little bit more of me. I hope y'all enjoyed this one. And this is just my opinion, right? I'm just a fan, and even then a pretty casual one because living out here, there are better things to do than watch college football. And if I'm gonna watch college football, I'll go over to Manoa and watch the Rainbow Warriors. So that's all I got for y'all. Shoots. I'm in for the hug. So lay me out. Oh, and gig 'em. Not that they're playing this weekend, but still.